Hey everyone, it's Stephanie, and welcome back to my channel. So today I have a Deadhouse Gates spoilery voice vlog. I decided halfway through this that I wanted to start keeping track of my thoughts. So instead of going back and just doing a whole video, these are just my Voxer thoughts that I sent to my friend Angela at Literature Science Alliance while I was reading Deadhouse Gates. The art I am using does not belong to me, but I am going to credit all of the artists down below. Please go check them out. They are amazing and have created some phenomenal Malazan art. So without further ado, let's just jump right in, and I hope you enjoy this experiment.
Okay, this is totally random because I don't know if this chat is dead or not, but I finally started Deadhouse Gates and I got through chapter 3, and I think I'm liking it more than Gardens of the Moon. I'm finding it a lot easier to read, and I don't know if it's because I survived Gardens of the Moon and now I'm used to it, or if the writing style is a bit different. I also don't really remember anything that happened in Gardens of the Moon since it's been, 11 months. I'm just really liking this one a lot more. I started it yesterday and I'm already 100 pages in. And I couldn't really do that easily with Gardens of the Moon, but I can with this one. I also think reading it physically helps my memory more with this one because it's really puzzly versus an audiobook. I'm also finding a lot more humor, which is great. Like a lot more humor. And the characters in this one are just fascinating. So I'm just really, really enjoying this, and I really wanted to share, especially because I've been in a fantasy slump for a while. And this is just making me excited to get back into fantasy. Holy shit, that was a crazy chapter. Oh my god. I love that we make the connection about why they want to kill the Empress. Like, I love that I'm making connections since I can't really remember a ton, but that sparked a memory from the first book, and so much good imagery and descriptions in this chapter. Like, so graphic, so gross, but so good. Like, fire ants swarming up people's thighs, and a giant of a man stood over him, his face tattooed like shattered glass. And then the guy, hi Oliver, Toblakai, says he's an escaped slave. He's seen 17 summers and has personally killed 41 enemies. Those are his ears on his belt. And at first it said they look like mushroom caps. Ooh, just that image. And then the other one I loved was the Aptorian. That thing sounded so freaking cool and so terrifying at the same time. And I looked it up just to make sure I was imagining it correctly. And it was even creepier than I imagined. So, oh my god. And then when Shaik, I guess that's how you pronounce it, she finally got the book and she's like, this prophecy is going to be fulfilled, and then her head gets exploded. Oh my god. Like, this whole chapter, I was just on the edge of my seat. End of it, when they have her body wrapped in linen, and they're like, she did say she was gonna, when she opened the book, she'd be renewed. And they're like, no, she's dead. And nothing happened except this coral going through her head. But then the prophecy was certain. So what do we do now? We wait. There's a storm coming. And then bam, chapter 6. The first, I just really, really liked this. It was so good, and I really want to read more. I don't want to burn myself out, but how can you stop at the end of a chapter like that? Oh my god. I haven't read anything this gory in a while, and usually, at least in the books I read, when things are this gory, it's like literary fiction about like in real life horrific things that happen to people. I can't think of a fantasy book that has had scenes like this. Maybe I blocked it out, but I also don't read a lot of grimdark. But I find that things like this, these images and the emotions associated with it, stick with me longer than the plot, if that makes sense. Like The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle by Haruki Murakami. I read that book, God, like almost 10 years ago, and I don't really remember that much about it, but there is one scene that I remember in perfect detail, and it was horrific and gory like that. And it has stuck with me. And I feel like images from this chapter, like the blood flies, obviously, ugh, like nightmare. And then when they're going through the streets, Duker going through the streets, and he sees the women who have been raped and then have their husbands' entrails wrapped around them after that. And just, like, I couldn't put it down, but it was so hard to read. And that's not going to leave my mind for a while. And I know I'm rambling, but it was, ugh. It kind of cracked me up with Culp when they were, what was it? The mage, and then, like, the whole, like, the pain through their body was so intense that it caused them to just, their bowels and their bladders to just release. And then when they finally get on the boat, he's like, so, who needs to wash out their leggings? And it was just such a nice break from the horrific things that have just happened. I feel like I needed that breath there. I also really enjoy Icarium and Mappo. I love their relationship, and it cracks me up. And then in regards to Fellison, I was kind of surprised that she wanted Bodden to go get Benneth, but also not, because, like you said, Stockholm Syndrome, it just fits. And then he's gotten her dependent on, I don't know how to pronounce it, Durang. So she hasn't really had to feel for a while. I don't really have a strong opinion either way on how women are in this book, to be honest, because I feel like what's happened so far have been things that would be realistic if this were to be happening in our world today. If that makes sense. But I'm hoping Fellison's arc, I hope she becomes stronger and comes into herself. Since she's so young, like, I feel like there's still a lot of hope for her. And I hope that makes sense. But, I mean, like you said, there really haven't been any other female people in here. So I don't really have a strong opinion either way yet. But I'm hoping it will be good the farther we get in the book. Also, I forgot to add this. In regards to Fellison, I think he does a good job of portraying her situation without it seeming like she's a bad person or he's looking down on her. She used what she had to make her situation a little better, but I didn't feel like he wrote it like, ugh, look at her. It was more, this is how it is, see her struggle, if that makes sense. So I appreciated the way he wrote that. Well, that was dark. I'm starting to understand why Fellison is kind of a controversial character. I know I'm just touching the tip of the iceberg because, it's book 2, but, oh my God, like I had to keep reminding myself what she went through and that she was 15, 16-ish. But just there was one scene where Heberick was, I guess, on the brink, and she's like, well, cut off the tattooed skin, I won't eat that. And it's like, wow, we've jumped to almost resorting to cannibalism. Even if it was meant as a joke, it was like, oh, that went really dark. But yeah, that whole tattoo scene was such cool imagery, like so vivid and so interesting. And I also like that we're kind of seeing a lot of this with Duker. I really like his point of view. And the last part of the chapter where they're in the desert and then things happen and then just it was just so well written. So well written. And yeah, going back to Fellison, I understand why she wants Benneth, but I want her to start to heal beyond that and be more in the moment and just come into her own, if that makes sense. Like, he's most likely dead. We'll see. But, yeah. It just, I want her to heal and be better. But I'm very interested to see where this is going, because that was a very dark and intense chapter, but it was so good. This chapter should not have read while I was eating lunch at work, but that's okay. Really good. I love when we're in the Warren and we're on this ship and we see all these severed heads, and then you go farther in and you see the headless bodies sitting in rows, and then nothing is decayed. So creepy, but such a cool, imaginative visual. And then when they blew the whistle and the eyes all open on the severed heads, that would creep me out so bad in real life. Ugh. Like, that's an image that's gonna stick with me. But I love the idea of the Warren. I think that's such a cool thing. And that this mad wizard is chasing them through this Warren. And I think because I can see things in my mind when I read, even if it's not always accurate, this whole section in this Warren is just so cool. And I love the way he wrote it. And he did not use the word ochre. I was very proud. I also love when we get to the next scene. I'm going to mispronounce it. Iskarol Pust is like sweeping this guy's face for spiders, which, ew, but hilarious. And he just seems like on the very edge of madness if he hasn't crossed that line yet. But I totally agree with you. I love these characters in this section, and I just love their dynamic and their relationship. And I think the scenes with them are the funniest. So I always look forward to coming back to those. And I think that was the perfect scene to end the chapter on, because we got so much heavy, crazy, dark stuff. And then we end it on a little bit of a humorous note. So I feel like Erickson does a good job of giving us these little take a breath moments because every chapter just keeps getting epic, and I don't know if I can handle this. It's so good. Short chapter, but it packs a punch. I totally agree. I loved this time with Kalam, and I also kind of low-key ship him with, is it Manala? He was talking to someone, and he says, but there's nothing holy in rape. And I really appreciate that attitude because I feel like we've gotten a lot of rape, but not a lot of condemnation of it from the characters, or at least looking down on it, if that makes sense. But I really like him. I want to know more about him. And yeah, it cracked me up that he was kind of like humble bragging about this, and it took like, what, less than a page about his taking down all these men. That kind of cracked me up. And I loved that scene with the Warren. Just thought the idea of sacrificing your soul to bridge was so interesting. And I just loved that whole visual of her like crumbling back to dust, and then this wound like folds in on itself and kind of heals. And the scene with Stormy when he said there was great pain. I asked how long. He said forever. And then Heberick says clanless, as good as useless, existence without meaning. And that just really hit me. Like, how alone he must feel. I feel really bad for him for that. And then the thing with the head. The guy stole a head. And I'm really interested to see how that plays out, since taking the head from the Warren killed the body. Just so odd, but such a visual. And I also loved the scene at the end with Bodden and Fellison. I don't know if I ship them yet, but I also hope that they do have at least a healthy sexual interaction and not another, like, toxic or unhealthy one. But I absolutely loved this. He was silent for a long moment, eyes on the meaningless horizon ahead. Then he turned to her. You ever think that maybe what you are is what's trapping you inside, whatever it is you're trapped inside? I love that. And then the little, oh yes you are, lass. Oh, my heart. I loved it. I was confused in this chapter, but enjoyed this chapter. I think I agree with what you said, that it was kind of hard to follow who was where during the battle scenes, but I feel like he wrote them in a way that kept me really captivated and interested, even if I wasn't fully comprehending everything that was going on. And I also am interested in this ice because book 3, like you said, is Memories of Ice. And I like all the references to it, especially because everything's been a desert. It was nice to have a little bit of different scenery or element references. I also loved the imagery of the enormous serpent. That was so cool. And then the scene where they kill the Ascendant was so graphic, but such a cool image. I was severely disturbed with the undead and the mothers stabbing the babies, and then he wrote that the babies were like jerking and writhing, and that image just is so haunting, and I did not like it. It's one of those, like, it'll probably stay for a while and haunt me. And I don't fully understand the whole purpose of that, but hopefully that'll be cleared up at some point. But I also like that we do find out more about the Wiccans. there were two quotes that I liked, and one is, "Victory tastes sweetest in the absence of haunted memories. Savor it." And then also, "Who needs temples and priests to chain and guide the expression of loss and dismay when all is sacred?" I'm really enjoying finding these little quote gems and like highlighting them so I can refer to them in the future. I feel like there's a lot of really beautiful or poignant lines in here that you might miss if you weren't really paying attention. This was a really cool chapter. I like how many reveals we got. I love the scenes with Fellison and Bauden. I don't know if I ship them as much as you do, but I do enjoy their interactions. And there's one scene where Fellison was thinking how great Benneth was and how he was her lover. And it's like, I get why she's thinking that with everything she's been through in her situation, but I was like, girl, he was not your lover. No. But I'm hoping she learns to let him go. I need her to do that. I also love the Imperial Warren. I thought that was so cool, and I want to know more about it. And I love that, oh, what's his face? Is it Kalam? There were a lot of similar names in this chapter. But he was like, if you concentrate hard enough, you can travel between warrens, which I thought was super cool. I also love the dinosaur fossils. That was really cool, too. And I also like Icarium, has these questions, and he was asking Mappo to tell him his memories. And Mappo was like, I don't think I should do that. It's your journey to discover that. And I'm very intrigued. Apt. I am growing to really like Apt, even though I know he's like a really creepy looking creature. But I love that he had a little conversation with Shadow Throne. I don't know why, I just found that adorable, even though the scene was kind of horrific. But I really liked that. So I'm really interested to see what's happening next, and I hope we get more answers. Oh, and this scene with this boy, oh my god, it was so creepy. It reminded me of something like in a demonic possession movie. Because he was like, okay, well, let's heal him the way you want. Forced healing demands a price. The flesh recovers while the mind writhes with the memory of pain, that bludgeon of helplessness. And then they, force heal him, and he's got one eye, and just sounds so creepy looking. But Apt was happy, so it was quite an image. Quite an image. Lots of things happened. I also thought the beginning with Duker was a bit boring. I'm sure it's relevant, and it was kind of interesting to learn more, but at the same time it just kind of dragged for me. But I feel like it's purposeful, so we'll see. One of the quotes that really struck me from this chapter was, "Children are dying. That's a succinct summary of humankind, I'd say. Who needs tomes and volumes of history? Children are dying. The injustices of the world hide in those 3 words." And I just think that is so relevant to today, and it just hit me. Oh, and then one thing that cracked me up was Culp, I think, was taking his pants off or something for them to get up into the cave, and he was like, says something like, turn around, and then Fellison's like, no, we all need a good laugh. And that just cracked me up. And I also thought it was cool that Heberick now has invisible hands that work, and he was able to just toss Culp all the way up into the cave above Fellison, even though this poor girl did all that work to get almost all the way there, and cutting her ankles and her wrists on the glittering glass in the quartzite. I felt so bad for her. But I also like Heberick's raves, like when he was talking about the hand and the finger, and he's saying the past is an alien world, and then we get in the cave and there's all these statues that used to be people. It was really creepy, but really cool. I really like the scene with Kalab and Minala. I need answers. And I also really liked, like you said, the concept of time that keeps being brought up and the circle of seasons. I want to know more. So much good humor in this chapter. I cracked up a lot. The rat playing dead, and then in the quote after that, I also laughed really hard at that. I thought that was so funny. I remember you said in another message that Duker kind of reminds you of a journalist, or what he's doing would be like a journalist today. And that came to mind at the one scene where he was like, well, basically like, screw the arrow fire. I need to take this in, since I'm a historian. And I thought that was just a really good moment for him. I'm also intrigued by the Red Blades in detention. That was a big plot twist near the end of that chapter. Oh, Kalam and Minala, I might have squealed a little bit at the end of that. I love that she threw a piece of fruit at him and then just leaves. And then after he leaves, she's going to go after him. And I am so for this. I love it so much. Even if it's not a romantic thing, even though I'm hoping it is, I love it. And I hope their relationship grows a little bit. But I also feel like something terrible is going to happen, since I am happy about this moment. But yeah, I really liked it. And it's okay if you ship people in Malazan. I feel like it's a little bit of happiness in a book that's just so freaking depressing sometimes. Oh, I thought the battle scenes were very well done. Even though I know they can be chaotic, I can kind of visualize what's going on, and I also love that we see more of the sappers. I also really like them. Holy crap, what a chapter. God, that just hit the ground running and didn't stop until the end. R.I.P. Culp. That was an intense way to die. I agree with you, the cat's tongue metaphor and like ripping her skin off, oh, it just had me cringing. But I'm glad she got healed. And I was really excited when Bodden came back, but then they left him, and then when he showed up later, just horrible. Horrible. But I love that they had that moment of tenderness where he put his head in Felison's lap and she was just kind of stroking his hair. I really, really liked that. And poor Heberick, he just seems like he's at his wit's end. I also loved the scene at the end with the two guardians of Shaik's corpse. I thought it was her coming back, but then I listened to your message and you were asking about Felison, and Felison does have black hair, I believe. I don't know. And in another chapter, it said that Absalar's father, I think, was missing an arm, but then the arm on this man looked younger. But again, the hands, that has to be Heberick, right? He's the only character with that significance. So, I don't know. It's a lot to think about. But oh my god, that was intense. Like, I was on the edge of my seat, and I flew through that chapter. So, I'm in chapter 15, and he used the word ochre again. And I just did a check, and apparently he only uses that word 24 times. I really thought it would be up there in the 50s or 60s. Either way, I need a new word. Once again, holy shit, what a chapter. The first thing that really cracked me up was at the beginning, and it was an insult, and it says, "You insolent excuse for a crab's anus," which I literally laughed out loud. And then there was a scene where they were talking about this horse, and it really just got to me the way it was worded. It says, "The dumbest of beasts seems capable of sensing its own impending death. Hood grants every living thing awareness at the very end. What mercy is that?" So much sadness. I also loved that little scene with Manala, and it's the same quote that you said, "All to chase a man I don't understand, a man I'm not sure I even like. Oh, woman, you're old enough to know better." Just cracked me up. Bodden burned in a fire of his own making. Stuff with Fellison and that. And then that one quote, I literally teared up, and it just says, "Grief rapes the mind, and I know all about rape. It's a question of acquiescence. So I shall feel nothing. No rape, no grief." And oh my god, that just like gut punched me. Just because I know Fellison's a controversial character, but I think I'm just so invested in her. Even though at points I don't like her. But I think that's an interesting dynamic for sure. Oh, another really good quote. "You cannot be remade unless you are first broken." And that one also hit me really hard. Let's see. Oh, and then another scene where I like teared up. Apparently, I'm just very emotional in this chapter, but the scene with Mappo and Ikariam, and he's seeing these structures and it clicks, and he's like, "I calculate that it's been 94,000 years since I last stood here. There has to be some kind of error in that." And you can just, the way he wrote this, you could just feel Mappo's like internal conflict and sorrow. Like Mappo hugged himself, little things like that. There's one where it says Mappo, the scene blurred before Mappo's eyes, and he just felt his sorrow, and it was like, oh my god. Oh, I like their relationship. I like that it's hilarious, but there's also so much emotion there. And I also had that same thought that I wonder if Ikariam figures out everything if Mappo does have to kill him, which I hope that's not the case. It says Mappo found his heart slowing. Just do not think again of that lone surviving artifact, Ikariam. And it's just making him nervous. And I also love the stakes that we have with Fellison, where it's like, if you've survived the ritual, you're Shaik come back or reincarnated. But if you don't survive it, then you're not. And it's like, okay. So there's high stakes there. And then this end scene with Apsalar and her father, who I guess his real name is Relic, if I read that correctly. That was epic too. And of course, it just ends on a note where I just immediately want to go into the next chapter. That was a chapter. I also like the quote you mentioned. "All that we were has led us to where we are, but tells us little of where we're going. Memories are a weight you can never shrug off." Profound. As you saw in the Discord, Ikariam and Mappo, I love them so much. And Mappo cried. He cried. My heart. I feel like this is gonna get worse, and I can't take it. I also loved the butterflies throughout this whole chapter. It was so, like, deliciously creepy, but beautiful, but disturbing. It was really cool. And yes, all the dogs, all the refugees. I also love the sappers. They're so entertaining. And yeah, the end of that chapter, I understand why Duker choked a guy out, but I was not expecting that big of a physical response from him, and I think he just reached his limit. I need answers. I also want to know about Ascendancy because I don't have the answer to your question, and I know it will come in time, and I'm sure that you have already had this question answered since you're a couple books ahead of me, but it's so fascinating to me. I would also like to know the answer to that whenever it reveals itself. I also really like this chapter. I don't know if it was my favorite, but it was a lot of fun, which was nice because the last few chapters have been very emotionally draining. But I like that that what you said, it was basically Kalam fighting a pirate, which is just so great. And I love the concept of the Warren they were in, like messing with their minds, and they can't tell how long they've been out to sea. It was kind of a mind bender, and I loved it. I also thought the scene with Felison was very random, and I don't know why it was in this chapter. I I enjoyed it. I like that we get a little bit more info about her, but it was very oddly placed. Oh, I also liked this last line. The assassin felt Salk Elan's eyes on his back as he strode away. You've the arrogance common to every mage, friend. You'll have to excuse my pleasure in spreading cracks through it. And I just loved that line. Lots of things happened in this chapter, but I think my favorite moments were with Mappo and Akirium. So yeah, at the beginning when Mappo is doing something and Fiddler teared up. Ugh. And then at the very end, the sapper watched Mappo sling his weapon over his shoulder, then gently lift Akirium. The jag hung limply within those massive arms. The scene was touched with such gentle caring that Fiddler had to look away. And I swear to God, if Erickson does something to either one of those, I'm going to be so freaking pissed. And I have a feeling it's going to happen because everybody says that this book has a lot of emotions and sadness, and a lot of people love these two, and I just know something bad is going to happen, and I'm going to be mad. The scene where Fiddler meant to throw the cusser, and then he threw the conch shell instead, was so great. And just epic. Epic. So I'm afraid to continue, but I need to know. Well, I enjoyed this chapter. I was on the edge of my seat. I love the imagery of the Warrens, and then the one, image with the Warrens that really stuck out to me. They're in the sea, and this Warren opens, and the Denrabi come out, and then just eats this entire swarm of wasps. And then more Denrabi just keep coming out. And I looked it up to see if I was envisioning it correctly. And I'll send a photo. Nightmare fuel. And then not only are they fighting the Denrabi in this, tumultuous sea, then bloodflies swarm in. And then, what is it? Tremolor? Or however you pronounce it. Didn't allow them to open the door, and then it just ended at that scene, and it was like, ugh, I need a paper bag. I'm hyperventilating. But that was so well written. And then the very end of this chapter, I really enjoyed it, and I think it's because it gave me the same feeling that I feel when we get to the Helm's Deep scene in Lord of the Rings. And I know you're not a huge fan of that one, but just that preparing for battle and anticipating it, and then you have people coming to help or offer help, and it's just that feeling of nervousness and then kind of excitement to see what's going to happen. And then the very last line, when Coltane, the war chief, yanked free from his tulwar from its leather sheath, revealing a blade snapped 10 inches above the hilt. He raised it over his head and bellowed, "The Wiccans, the Wiccans, the Wiccans." And it gave me the same feeling as when Helm's Deep happened. And I absolutely loved it. And maybe since I have so much nostalgia and love for that series, maybe that's why I just love this even more. But I'm also nervous to find out what happens. Oh my god, that ended on quite a note. I felt so bad for Crocus when Apsalar pointed out that Moby is a familiar and he had to leave him behind and he was tearing up. It's like, poor baby. That just hit me. I felt bad for him. Oh, and then all the scenes with the refugees trying to get across to Arin, that was so intense. Oh my god, I was on the edge of my seat. And I love that Duker got a leading role and he had to put away his historian role for a little bit, and that he saved the child and handed him to Keneb to save. I just loved that whole scene. And there was also a line in here when Coltane was sending Duker on his mission, and he says, "It is not the Empire's soldiers the Empress cannot afford to lose. It is its memory." And I absolutely loved that line. And then the end of this, Kalam getting stuck to the railing and then getting stabbed and thrown in the water, which is full of sharks. And then that end scene with, I'm 99% sure it's gotta be Manala, and she just jumps over the captain and his first mate into the water to go after Kalam. And they were just like, well, anyone crazy enough to do that deserves our help, so let's go. Ugh, it's so good. I loved that. And I like them together. I want more time with them. This was a really hard chapter. The stuff with Hebrick and Fellison / Shaik was really interesting. But the whole slaughter scene was just crazy. I just felt so bad for Nether and Nil because you could see they cared so much for Coltane. And it was so frustrating that all these people wanted to save him, and Pormqual, is that how you pronounce it, was just too cowardly to do it. But I love that, well, I don't love, but it was touching that so many people died trying to protect him. And it was so tragic that they got him anyway. And then the scene where the crows come and they're trying to get his soul, and the mage is using his sorcery to just kind of beat them out of the way, and they're just persisting to come and get his soul because it has to be in, what was it, 11, because 1 just wasn't enough. And then when they got Squint to come up because they saw that there was just no other option, and he started crying when he figured out who they wanted him to mercy kill. And then, I forget which one, Nether or Nil, one of them, Nether, I think, was just begging him to put Coltane out of his misery and just kill him. And while they were doing that, the army was just throwing flesh from dead soldiers at him. It was so disturbing. And then Squint killed him. And just the scene where the crows just come down and take him away was so just epic. And it's just one of those scenes where it's like I was so caught up in it. I'm not going to forget that imagery for a while. And it was just so heart-wrenching, but so touching that they were just following this man and just cared for him enough that they saw there was no other hope and they wanted to take him out of his misery and give him that release. So, my God, I have 3 more chapters left, I think. I don't know if I can take much more of this. Well, this was intense. I absolutely loved I don't even know what you would call it, the place they were in with the mosaic floor and every, inch represented a place. It was kind of hard to wrap my mind around it, but at the same time, it was so cool. And then seeing the 3 dragons fly overhead, not even notice them, and just in a V formation, and then dive exactly where they wanted to go and go through. I absolutely love that. It also kind of cracked me up that Ascariel Pust was just raving about random crap and then just disappeared through a tile. I know that it said, how is it worded? Some mist, came through and closed up the hole. So I want to know more about that. We haven't quite found out about it yet. And then Mappo and Icarium also just go through a hole. And so we don't know where they ended up yet. And I'm very worried for them because I know right before that, Mappo was having some internal conflict about friendship over duty. And I really want to know where they landed. But I liked that the remaining people used the rope to tie themselves together so that they wouldn't get separated again. And then there were a couple good quotes in here. One I really liked. The worlds live on, beyond us countless unraveling tales. And then, we are all lone souls. It pays to know humility, lest the delusion of control, of mastery, overwhelms. And indeed, we seem a species prone to that delusion again and ever again. So much yes. The very end, when stupid Pormqual and, I forgot the other guy's name, the other High Fist, made it seem like Coltane led this whole rebellion and was a traitor when he wasn't. I was so angry. But then this last section, or this last scene, is so haunting. And they make Duker walk past these 10,000 dead or dying Malazans on these spikes around the tree, just being held in by held on by spikes, and just seeing all that blood and bodily fluids just, and then it hurt because he's in so much pain. All this knowledge he has, I don't think anybody would know about it because he hasn't been able to share it yet. And he knows what really happened. But it's interesting that a little bit earlier, when he fell, the text mentioned that the thing around his neck broke, and when he looked down, he didn't see any glass. And so now I want to know, what is going to become of that. It has to be significant, because it was meant for, I think, Coltane, right? And then Coltane gave it to Duker. So something has to come of it, because it was mentioned several times. So I'm interested. It was just the end of this chapter. I was talking about the Jaghead ghost, and then Duker like finally slips into darkness, and then you just hear this laughter. It, I don't know. I'm scared for him. I want him to be okay, but I don't think he will be unless something happens, particularly pertaining to that bottle. And then we're still awaiting, is it pronounced Tavor? Tavore? Felison's sister. We're still awaiting her whirlwind to come, and earlier it said it would take a week, and I'm not 100% sure how much time has passed in all of this. That's one thing that has been confusing for me, is keeping track of the time all of these things are happening. I have chapter 23, chapter 24, and then a 2-page epilogue. And I don't know how he's going to wrap up some of this stuff. And I have a feeling there's going to be a cliffhanger. I just know it. There's no way he's going to wrap all this up in the amount of pages I have left. This was kind of a trippy chapter. So much happened in such a short time. We meet Gothos, Icarium's father, which was so interesting. And I feel like we're going to learn about him in another book, because there's no way that his story or whatever, like, we met him for a reason. But there's so little left in this book. I have a feeling he's going to show up in a later book, which I'm fine with. I would love to know more of that backstory. And then we see Apt and Panic again. I guess that's how you pronounce it. And I love that they came just in time to get everyone to Mock's hold. And then the scene with Kalam and Lysine was kind of cool, but kind of like underwhelming. But I feel like, just because I feel like we're preparing for like this epic ending, but this book has been so epic, maybe that's why it kind of felt a little underwhelming, if that makes sense. But I love that he just figured out it was a corpse, and her voice was coming from a corpse. And then he just let it go because he heard her anger. But I feel like, again, this is going to be brought up in another book, because I don't feel like it could just end on that note. I also love that Apt and Panic and all the group swung in to save Kalam and Manala from the 20 assassins. And I love that scene when Kalam was like, "Why did you follow me?" And Manala's like, "Dude, you cannot be that dense." Like, oh, it made me smile. It was so cute. So I really like them together. I know we didn't get a ton of time, but I feel like we got just enough information to where it makes sense that there was a connection, unlike in the other series we're reading, where sometimes it's very insta-lovey. And then the scene at the end when Shadow Throne is like, "Well, you said you wanted kids and you're going to be a husband and wife, so bam, here you are." And it's the 1,300 children that Apt saved previously, and it's like, again, this is going to have to come up in another book. There's just no way. So I feel like we're kind of tying up some threads, but then leaving some because there's more of a story there. I have 20 minutes left in this book, and I have absolutely zero idea what is going to happen, and it frustrates me and excites me at the same time. Oh my god. So many things. Shaik naming her daughter Felison Younger is going to be so confusing, because I'm going to have to remember that Fellison is no longer Fellison, just like sorry is no longer sorry. And now there's another Fellison in the mix. We also only got just a little bit of time with Tavor, so brief. So I'm also thinking that that's going to be in another book, but it's connected to this, obviously. Oh, the scene, the scene with Iscariel Pust and Morgana. Number one, spiders. Ew. Ew. That is like my worst nightmare. But saying that he was leaving these false things like the false path of hands and things like that was super interesting and kind of a plot twist. And he just kind of cracks me up, but I love that they just kind of bicker and it's just funny. Oh, and then I don't remember their names. When they went back, it was Rudd and Earp. And I don't remember who sent them, even though I just read this. But anyway, they went to look for, Baluk? Is it Baluk that sent them? They went to look for Duker's body because of the bottle that shattered. And so his soul is in the bottle. And it was kind of cute because they were like, okay, well, let's take the bottle. And the other one was like, nope, you got to take the body too. They don't really like getting a new one. And it was just, oh. So I'm so glad he's still, like, alive, so to speak. I was going to be so upset if that's how he ended after all of that. So I loved that. And then I totally forgot about the piece of cloth that he had been handed. And I don't think he had ever opened it, at least not on page that I remember. But the name, Salas Lorthel, I feel like I should I know that name? Or is that something that we just now found out that I will need to remember in a future book? I'm so glad he's alive. And then the scene that broke me so bad was when we were back with Mappo and Carium. And Carium finally woke up and he's like, how long has it been? And Mappo was like, it's only been a day. The last thing he remembers is that they saw an Aptorian and decided to follow it, and that was it. It's so bittersweet. Like, I just love their friendship. And then after a while, as they're walking, it says, Icarium glanced at Mappo. What would I do without you, my friend? The nest of lines framing the Trell's eyes flinched. Then he smiled ruefully as he considered his reply. Perish the thought. Oh, I love them so much. And I hope we get more with them. Because they just make me so happy, and I love their friendship. And I'm so glad they're okay. So, all I have left is the epilogue, but I'm so drained. This was interesting. This woman is about to abort her baby because she thinks it's cursed and there's nothing there. And then someone stops her and she thinks it's flies, and then it turns out it's a ton of crows. And then all of a sudden she feels her baby come to life. And it's like, ooh, is this the soul of Coltane? Ooh, this is so interesting. And then it just ends. And I still have so many questions, but this was so good. Oh my god. I liked Gardens of the Moon. I freaking loved Deadhouse Gates. I found the writing to be a lot more compelling, even though it was still just as gorgeous, if not more, than in Gardens of the Moon. I just think he grew as a writer. And there are so many scenes in here that are just going to stick with me. And I think this was just the right amount of, like, not confusing, but I liked that it was like a puzzle, but it was a puzzle that was just challenging enough. I feel like in Gardens of the Moon, I was always in over my head. And even if I didn't fully understand what was happening, I kind of enjoyed the ride. I was still left at the end like, what did I just read? Whereas with this one, I had so much fun trying to like connect the dots and remember things. And then at the end, I actually kind of have predictions, which I never do. They're probably wrong, but that's okay. But at the end of Gardens of the Moon, I was like, I need to take a break before I pick up Deadhouse Gates because it's going to be so dense. And I didn't find this one as, like, it wasn't as much work as I expected it to be, if that makes sense. And I really enjoyed it. And it was really surprising. I feel so accomplished. But I loved this so much. Now I really want to start Memories of Ice, even though I know, or I think we're going to be with different characters again. Obviously, 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely loved this. And I think it'll be cool one day on a reread when I know what happens to see all the foreshadowing and Easter eggs and threads that he wove throughout this. So this was so awesome.
So those were my spoilery thoughts for Deadhouse Gates. Hopefully this was interesting for you guys. Have you read this book? If so, please let me know. Did you enjoy it as much as I did? Please let me know down below. If you made it this far but don't have anything to add, drop some kind of desert emoji down below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.